We do indeed live in times of great disruption and transformation. In my work for EY, I get to work every day thinking about what this means for the future of work. I'm a creative and I'm a branding leader. So I get to spend all day thinking about how does transformation affect work. And unless you've been living on Mars, you may have heard that automation and the robots will replace us all, if you believe the rhetoric. I'm very lucky. I have a really interesting job and I work with some extraordinary, talented people. But it wasn't meant to be like that. When I was 7 years old, if you told me I was going to be a global branding leader for a professional services firm, I wouldn't have understood you, and even if I had, I would have almost certainly have started to cry. I grew up in a remote and rural part of England on the East Coast called Lincolnshire. And Lincolnshire then, and still is, more about agriculture than culture. This was the 1970s. It was, shall we say, a tech-absent era. Not like the childhood my children are enjoying and I'm paying for, with broken screens every other day. So there wasn't much to do, but I was blessed with a father who was a gifted pianist, although he hadn't been able to afford a piano for many years. So when a Singaporean concert pianist rolled into the town next to ours, I say town, we're talking village, 700 people lived in my village. It was an exciting moment, certainly for my dad. He rushed out and bought tickets and said, "Julia, we're going to go and see a concert pianist." Okay, not doing anything else today. So I was taken to this concert, and the things I remember mainly are that for 99% of it, I was unbelievably, stultifyingly bored. It seemed to go on forever. This man, the novelty wore off quickly, his huge hands flashing up and down the piano. I was so relieved when it finished. I remember feeling like, thank goodness we can get out of here. And to my horror, he walked back on again and sat down. And I thought, please let this be over. But he then spent 4 minutes playing a prelude by Rachmaninoff, which transported me in my little 7-year-old brain to a place that I didn't know existed. I was overwhelmed, I was overjoyed. I jumped out of my seat and I clapped like a maniac. And in that moment, I changed my life ambition from prima ballerina to concert pianist, which was quite an announcement considering I was growing up in a house without a piano. My mum was quite pleased because I was a clumsy and physically unimpressive child. Some would say still as an adult. And in a tutu, I was borderline dangerous. My father didn't need much encouragement to empty their small savings destined for a new washing machine. And before we knew it, we had a piano installed in our home and I began lessons. And pretty soon it became clear I was quite good. I was actually very good. I was a bit precocious and I was a bit of a brat, but I could play the piano. And my dad and I would spend hours together as he taught me, shouted at me, prodded me, and turned me into quite a good little musician. I leapt through the grades, and by the age of 14, I could play that piece by Rachmaninoff that man had played that night when I was so bored. And I was still fixed on my North Star. I was going to be a concert pianist. No messing with that. My father died 2 days after I took the last piano grade. I lost my companion, and I lost my inspiration. And I also lost the man who would bully me into working a bit harder. And this spurred me on even more, actually, to do a diploma that he'd never had the chance to do. And then I was at London University doing a Bachelor of Honours in music. And I was a masterclass scholar at an international music festival. My goal seemed almost within reach. I was still fixed on becoming a concert pianist. And then something I could have done with knowing when I was about 18 was pointed out to me, and that was I wasn't going to be good enough. Feedback is a gift. Not good enough to be a concert pianist. Good pianist on a good day, very good, but not going to be an international concert pianist. Sorry about that, Julia. Nowadays, I can't help thinking that people would perhaps challenge that or get a second opinion, but I didn't. I just accepted it. Okay, not good enough. So in that moment, I went from aspiring concert pianist to failed concert pianist without a job, because while everyone else had been applying for internships and grad programs, I was busy in the practice room for 8 hours a day, wrestling with Bartok and whoever else, totally absorbed in my mission to become a concert pianist. So this left me with something of a problem. No job, no graduate career, late 80s, not a good situation to be in. My mother, with characteristic British understatement, described this as being in something of a pickle. It was actually a bit of a catastrophe, and my first experience of uncharted waters. So I converted my student job into a full-time job, and I was a gorilla in a theme park, walked around in a gorilla outfit. It wasn't all glamour. Sometimes I was the pirate on the ship that sailed the stagnant sea and walked the plank twice a day for the amusement of children. And in between times, I was teaching piano, which taught me I don't like children, a situation that has remained unchanged, even having two of my own. And I was an accompanist for often ungrateful soloists, and I became a sort of emergency on-call pianist for a theatre group whose resident pianist either had appendicitis or some sort of over-alcohol consumption during the interval. This was not the glittering career I'd expected or hoped for. It really couldn't continue. And so sometimes in life, we talk about disruption as it's something that it's done to us, but I decided to disrupt myself. And I announced to the world of music that I was leaving. The world of music took this in its stride, by the way, and I was no great loss to the international piano scene. And so it was that in 1997, when the rest of the UK was mourning the tragic death of Princess Diana, I somehow got through the door of a job interview for a recruitment business. Everyone was very distracted in the UK that week. I remember it distinctly. And I don't wish to diminish the grief that the nation felt, but for me it was a huge opportunity. The lady who interviewed me only asked me two things. Could I get along with people? Yes, I was a professional pirate. And could I be left to get along with things on my own? Yes, I'd spend 7 hours in a practice room with just a piano. And she gave me a job, which was by any means slightly reckless because I couldn't actually do anything. Didn't matter. I had a suit, I had shoes I couldn't walk in, and I had a desk. And it became very clear to me that I was a very late starter. I was surrounded by 22, 23-year-olds who were much smarter than me, better educated than me, and knew how to do their job. So I had a lot of ground to make up, and I did. I really did make up some time. Pretty soon I was getting promoted. I don't know how. Just getting along with people and doing things as I was left to it. And then I got headhunted. And then I was working for Arthur Anderson. Suddenly I've got a team, feeling really important now. My life has transformed. I've gone from failed concert pianist to reasonably successful executive corporate woman about town. Feeling pretty pleased with myself. Didn't have a piano. Got rid of that. Didn't have room for it anymore. Too busy. Far too busy. Jetting around, being important, being busy. And certainly hadn't played the piano for a very long time, but I didn't seem to care about that. It didn't seem to bother me. I was okay. I was doing all right. Until one day I was at some family gathering or other, and I was probably drinking alcohol, as you do at family gatherings. And I overheard somebody saying, yeah, I think Julia used to play the piano a bit. And it stopped me dead in my tracks, really, that someone could describe me as someone who used to play the piano a bit. Did they not know that I could play the Rachmaninoff Prelude in C-sharp minor when I was 14? Did they not know how hard I'd worked and how many hours I'd spent training on this instrument? Did they not know I was a failed concert pianist? And the answer, of course, was they didn't. I didn't even bother to mention what I'd done my degree in on my CV. I didn't talk about it. It wasn't relevant, didn't have value, wasn't going to impress anybody. Who cares that you were a failed concert pianist? And then a few months later at work, I was confronted by a Hungarian child in a colleague's house in Hungary. And for some reason, he had a piano and he wanted me to play it with him. I have no idea why. I must give off some kind of piano vibe, but he kept coming up to me, and his English was way better than my Hungarian, so I was forced to sit at the piano, and I couldn't play. I couldn't play. Couldn't get my fingers to do anything. Gone. All that work, gone. And in that moment, I realized I'd done something really rather terrible. I had discarded and destroyed, arguably, the most interesting thing about myself. And I couldn't help thinking, what would my dad say? Julia, what have you done? So, when you're in that situation, what are you going to do? How could something so familiar to me be so completely alien? How could I end up in uncharted waters with the piano? The only thing I really knew right from the beginning of my life, pretty much. So, I set about rebuilding my technique. And believe me, if you leave something to rot for long enough, it really will rot. I'd done a great job. It was rubble. I couldn't play Bar Black Sheep anymore. But I wanted to play that Rachmaninoff again. I promised myself that I would get back to playing that Rachmaninoff. I wasn't going to be a concert pianist. Didn't matter. I just needed to get back to that piece. It took me a while. My kids weren't happy. My dogs weren't happy. No one was happy. What was that noise? My hands weren't happy. And I discovered that my hands, 14 years of neglect, they weren't doing so good. Turns out, got a little bit of arthritis creeping in. All those hours in the practice room, ironically, had damaged my joints. So now I've got urgency. Now I'm playing whenever I can. Doesn't matter that I'm busy, doesn't matter that I'm flying around, doesn't matter I've got kids, whatever else is going on. I make time because who I really am is a piano player, and in an age of total disruption and transformation, the only thing we really can be sure of is who we really are. So I'm going to play the Rachmaninoff for you in a minute. I'm sorry about that. And I play it for you because actually, instead of thinking of myself as a failed concert pianist, I should have thought of myself as an almost concert pianist. Do I introduce myself as that? No, that would be crazy. I'm a piano player, and I also work in branding for a living. So, my question to you is this. Are you absolutely sure that you are true to yourself? Or have you lost sight of any of your passions and talents because you've confused them with not having commercial success or academic value? And if you have, what are you going to do about it? Thank you.